Hello, everybody. I'm Luke with Cost Tech Support. So let me share the start page and see if we can get this to work. So hopefully you guys can all see my screen. And then I need a chat box so I can keep track of hopefully anything. Okay. So with TOPSpro overview, if you ever go to costas.org, great information, all that. But if you ever need to go to the training sites or the Rolling Hills servers or the simulation, you can kind of just click or type in, Rolling Hills instead of going through the help docs and all that, or search for anything, right? If you need, first aid testing, anything you kind of need, search is really nice. So we type Rolling Hills. Some people have ads because they don't know how to stop them. And then you can click, steps to access the simulation server. And then this is going to bring you to all the sites along with all the different logins, right? You can be an administrator, you can be a coordinator, you can be a teacher, you can be a proctor. So if you want to practice anything specifically, you have all the creds, you have all the different ways in the simulation server. And so we're going to go ahead and go to the Rolling Hills. So you'll go to etestonline.org, / Rolling Hills. However, depending on where you are, you might use ca. Etest or Lyric or just eTest or Washington or Miami, there's different servers. So make sure you're connecting to the correct server. So you can take the unsecured, you can take a test. You can sign in as the, proctor if you want to practice that, or if, when you're doing your right one. However, we're going to be talking about TOPSpro. So in the top left, you're going to see install TE client. So when you click that, that's going to install it, put it on your desktop, and then it's going to launch TE. So let me new share on TOPSpro since we're going to switch. And so now you guys will see TOPSpro Enterprise server. So again, just like we were talking about the eTest server sides, now we're talking about T. So you got to select your server, Rolling Hills, 4908. That's our agency. Administrator, 10, because 10 is the best number. We all know this. And our password obviously is going to be admin. And then we can sign in. And it goes in. So when you start up, it goes right to the start page. Some people don't necessarily like the start page. I personally like it for a couple reasons. If you look on the far right, you'll kind of see these alerts, right? Notifications. So if there was updates, if anybody's requesting anything, if anything's getting pushed out, same thing with if you have state announcements or agency things, depending on how you guys kind of work with it, it's kind of nice. You can also set up your shortcuts. You can set up, instead of going through the menus, you can have recent reports. You can set up your own reports. And then obviously you have the just correct. Now, some people don't like it. You can get rid of it. That's perfectly fine. You can just close it just like, a regular tab in a browser. If you want to see it again, view, start page, comes right back up, closes over and over again. If you just hover, I'm not clicking, but hovering, you're going to notice I'm connected to the Rolling Hills. It kind of tells you where you are. So if you ever forget, or if you make a call like, oh, I don't know my agency, I got to log out and log back in, just hover over it. It tells you right up there. If you click it, you can lock it if you need to walk away. You can disconnect. You can change the password. You can associate account. You can look at your options. You can exit. When you go to the view, you've got your start page like we just showed you, your dashboard. You can change the size, make the font a little bigger, make it a little smaller. You have those options. Under organization, this is going to be kind of more of your agency side of records, if that makes sense. So you're going to see, your agencies, your sites, your classes. So this is all agency related things, right? Your users, they're attached to your agency, access groups, personnel, when you're setting up your teachers and functional roles and things like that, your test administrations, your forms, you have all these nice little things, if you delete anything, testing stations, testing sessions, templates, test in progress announcements, graduation policies, student portal, data collection settings, data sharing response, quarterly data. So this is kind of like on the agency side attached to the agency itself. Now, when you go to records, this is where you're talking about specific things to the student. So a little different. So instead of that broad class side, you're now saying, hey, I'm going to students and I'm looking specifically at the student demographic lister or the in program years, records, documents, data sharing requests, classes, what are the class enrollments attached to the students? What is the class record? Their attendance attached to the student, their programs, what are their program enrollments, what are their program records, their tests attached to the student. So anything student side, you can always kind of get from here. If you're doing invites, E&E, right here with your core performance, your invitation, survey responses, graduation, so student side. Now, when you go to reports, this is where it's kind of a mix, right? So you can now start doing reports, and it's going to look at, and you can break it down by a class, and then it's going to pull that individual student record information and kind of give you a nice clean report, or maybe, like how many students are missing this, how many people, if you're running payment points or the test results, or do they get a level, do they not get a level? So next assigned test per classes, you can kind of start breaking things down. So you've got your next assigned test, your personal score report, test administrations, your WTU balance, if you go under demographics, there's some good hours reports in here, as well as the demographic stuff as well. They're detailed, the summaries, if you just want a quick, clean little kind of look at it. And then a lot of hours, student hours, class hours, enrollment summaries, hours since last test, monthly attendance. So if you're kind of like, oh, I wonder if there's any reports, demographics, there's nice. Program outcomes. So all the things like when they're doing their entry records or update records, you can kind of get those reports along with labor force right here. The test results. So this is where you guys are going to have a lot of the fun. You can run your individual skills profile on the student side, and summary for the whole class, things like that. Your competencies, you can get a lot of fun in there, changing how a report runs 4 or 5 different ways. Your content standards, learning gains, test response, test history, see all their tests, consumer reports, graduation reports, data management. So this is going to help you clean up your data and see what's wrong. The DIR, data integrity, is really, really good. The detail is nice. Student profile class, along with duplicate students. You can kind of see if, hey, do we have any duplicate students we need to kind of merge, clean up? That way we're not duplicating. Maybe they've got a pre-test under one number and the post-test is in the other number. If we merge them, we got pre-post, but right now we just got a pre-test for one and a pre-test for another. So that's another one you want to kind of run and make sure you don't have any duplicates. State reports, California, you've got your CAPE tables, your CAPE barriers, your CAPE DIR. So this one expands the federal NRS DIR to the CAPE program. So it's very important. Your program hours, performance population, employment earnings, your payment points, student gains, your all civics reports, your I3 summaries. So very good stuff for California. Federal reports. So now this is all the federal side, right? Following those federal guidelines. You've got your NRS tables 1 through 11, periods of participation, statistics, the NRS monitor, performance, persister, barriers to employment, the WIO earnings and survey now, the ad hoc reports where you can kind of mix and match what you need to and want. My reports, when you set up that right report locator wizard, when you want a reports manager, if you're setting up the start page, things like that, your dashboard, your ad hoc. Tools is when you're running your wizards and when you're kind of doing something a little more. So, when you're doing the scanning wizard, it's like, when you go through it, what are you trying to do? Okay, we're doing this format, importing this file type, and we're going to review it and do that. Third-party imports, same kind of thing. What are we going to do? Here's our, same thing, imports, scanning, you're going to load it up, class replication wizard, proxy wizard, you're pulling from last year. It's a wizard, it's full kind of thing. If you're exporting and importing entire databases, the core performance wizard for E&E, your quarterly data submission when you're submitting, additional assessments when you're importing your, co-apps, and the scheduler. Help is where you're going to have your contents, the release notes, your, end user license agreements when you guys sign in. So all that's going to be, it's kind of your menus. Any questions? A little pause here with just the navigation and all that. Perfect, pretty basic. So we're going to go ahead and go to, records, students, demographics. So now we're in the student demographics. This is a lister. And what's nice about it is when you're on the student side, it has, everything's under that student. So it's nice. And so I'm trying to think if it would be easier to, we'll go ahead and show all the different things here first before we create a student. But essentially we have columns, right? Student ID, name, birth date, gender. If you ever need to see more, some or less, you can right click. If you right click on a column, you're going to see the options to, show email, show fax, show all these things, show HISA scores, show all of this. So there's a question, why do I not have access to all these various reports? So depending on what state you are in, what server you're connected to, and what TOPSpro Enterprise level. There's basic and there's enhanced. So the rolling hills is using the enhanced. So some things you might have access to because it's, what level you have and the state. So if you're in a different state, different server, you don't have access to certain things. So you might not have those access. So yeah, that's most likely why you're not seeing like maybe possibly some of the California things or some of these other reports. Everybody has different things, if that makes sense. But good question. So it will be different for each agency. Some states have extra things, some states have less things, as a general rule. And then, so then essentially, you can right click show, but you can also do the columns. So if you don't like doing the right click, you can always click the columns up here and, add it that way. I want to move it over here. I want to add the city, I want to show their email. And then, you see all the different options and you just click OK. And now we've kind of popped up city and email over here as well. And if we want to get rid of them, we just hide the city, we just hide the email. And then sort is going to be the same. Now you're going to notice up here, you have these little triangles essentially, right? Up, down. So if we want to filter by address or gender or sort, it's going to load, but that's a way to kind of filter all of them, or by date of birth. Let it go. Well, it's got to load. I've got probably too many people, but once it loads slowly, probably should have reduced it. You'll notice it sorts. Right, I'll get to I missed one, I think. So when you do this, I will get to that. So you can kind of set up exactly how you want, right? You can set up your column, you can set up your sorts. If you click sort, you can add the different sorts that way. If you hold control, you can add multiple sorts that way. Then you can delete if you need to delete it. We recommend never delete cascade. So if we click delete, you will get rid of it. You can refresh, you can invite. If you click more, you can export. I'm trying to get the schema. I'll just get the schema. So the question is, if you set up your columns perfectly, if you set up your sort perfectly, if you have it, how can you save it? What you can do is you can click more and you want to go to schema. If you click schema, you can now say, perfect setup, right? And you can save it. You can also say that, yeah. So you can then save it. And now it's named perfect setup or whatever, right? And if you click the drop down, you have all the different options. You can go back to the default. You can switch back to the perfect. You can see I may have set up multiple perfect setups. And now it's going to be, let me see if I can make it a little wider for you guys. You'll see it up here. So if I close the students and go back to records, students, demographics, you'll notice I was, for a moment, I still have perfect setup, right? And so that's all you gotta do. If you wanna go back to the default, you can go back to the default. If you wanna go back to a specific setup you've done, you can. You can also save over the default, right? So if you remove things and have it set up and you wanna just leave it default, when you go to schema, you can leave it the same and still save it and still have that. If you need to print it, you can print it out. If you want to export, you can export it out. You can view it. You can kind of request data. You can batch insert, you can batch edit, you can merge. So these are kind of like the basic navigators within it. You can enroll students from here. So like in the program years and then sites. And then new is like when you create a new student. I'm not going to talk about, I will talk about filter, but you may have noticed I've kind of skipped over it. So what I am going to do is I'm actually going to create a student. And we'll talk about why I tried to. Yeah, we'll import third party.
So Luke, real quickly, that question
Yeah.
was just if you could cover where to find that.
So it's a wizard, right? So all wizards are going to be under the tools. So you go to the third party import wizard. And so when you go into that, you're going to go through essentially the wizard. And that's when you're going to be selecting, I'm going to be doing attendance, right? So that's when you would need the attendance file. And then you'd select it and then go through that wizard where, okay, I'm uploading these files, I'm reviewing these, I'm importing them. But yeah, anything with importing, if you're scanning wizard, if you're third-party import, third-party, but under tools. So anything where there's like a wizard, a process, 99% of the time, it's going to be under the tools. Sorry, I kind of missed that. I need to focus a little better. But when we're creating a new student, obviously we're going to use 10, greatest number. Go ahead and put Luke, P, 2000, sure. You can put in basic information. That's kind of what we recommend at the minimum. As you can see underneath, you've got your SSNs, your SSN consents, your SSIDs, your NEDPI, GDID, HiSet, task, CalJobs ID. You can put in, highest level of school, your KC information, 2012 versus 2002 schools, your task, your HiSet, your races, your contact information, consumer information. Now, one thing I have noticed, some people request special fields, and you can do that. You can still kind of email tech support, like saying, hey, it would be nice to do this. It kind of goes through it. We review it. Sometimes we add things, sometimes we can't add things. But what I've noticed is if you do kind of have a special field or there's a fax field, I know some people have used that for, their specific agency. We would just love a custom kind of field. We've kind of recommended it. Some people use it that way. You don't have to, but I've seen agencies do that. You've got your disabilities, your special needs, your strengths, your communications, your primary guardian, your secondary guardian, but essentially the demographic basic information you can kind of save. Now, when you create it, I just created an account, right? Luke P, student ID 10. So if I go back to students, I should be able to, so I didn't talk about this because I wanted to set this up. If we click the little filter here, the little, funnels, we can starts with, equal with, ends with, contains, not available, right? So if we say student ID equal with 10 for 10, and we click OK, they show up. Why do they show up? Well, because I have the perfect setup and not using the default setup, I don't get to see that. But when I change it to too good, when I change it to the default setup, I do not see 10, right? If I click filter, the reason why is there's a program year filter for current program year. So because 10, Luke is not in the current program year, they're not going to show up. Hence, there's two options you can do. You can click on the filter and change it to all, which it was set, which we could see them, or you can always click the little red X. And this is going to be for all filters, right? So if you're in your definitions filter and your class listers, when you're looking for things, or even say you're trying to recreate it and you don't see it, and it says like, hey, this is a duplicate record, you cannot create this record. Anytime you see that, it's because there's a filter blocking it. So anytime you know for a fact, like, hey, I created this, or I know I have it, or it's saying it's duplicated, you can click filter in any lister, anything at all. You can go up here and you can clear all these things. So right now I'm, searching just for 10, no more program year. When I click OK, it's going to pop up perfect, right? Because I removed it. So that's something that you got to kind of be aware, and that's one of the problems when you're trying to find people. You can always go up here and either remove it or just select the all from the bottom filter. And now you'll notice there's no red X's, right? We're going to look at everybody and see everybody. And so that's one of those things you got to kind of be aware of. So if I wanted to, when you double click on a student and actually go in, you're going to notice there's a navigator on the far left. I'm trying to see current program, add columns, demographics example. Yeah, so we'll talk about this. So in the navigator, this is for the students, we're going to see edit view, the basic information we just put in, but we can go to in program years, and this is where you can kind of add, a program year, right? We don't have one for this year. So that's why we weren't able to see them. And we'll say, North Campus, and we can add it and we can save it. And so now we have 22, 23 program year. Student records, this is where you're going to see the student records, the class enrollments, class records, program enrollments, program records, their tests, demographic history, employment invitations, surveys. So you can kind of see this information. If you do have, student graduation programs and transcripts and other things like that, they'll be there as well. For the main part, pretty much demographic history and above is what you'll be focusing on and what is really going to be used for. There'll be case studies or certain things where you might use the other one, but demographic history and above is what you're really going to be looking at. And so any questions about any of those so far? Anything about when you're setting these up, setting up special things? If you left click and hold, you can kind of drag it if you don't like the order. Or if you want to do it through the columns lister, you can move it up, move it to the right, add, remove, add them all, remove them all. So you have some flexibility there. A lot of people just like to kind of left click and drag or right click and show last name, show first name, set up the columns that way. That's perfectly fine. There's no problem at all. Or last name, first name, different ways. And then if you're going to save it like before, schema, you can save over the default, or you can type in a new one, perfect two, and save that. And so there's no problems there. Or you can reset to default. So you have those options. How about student goals? So the goals are going to be under their student records. So that'd be a different lister, right? So that'd be records, students, records, and they'd have goals under here. Or if you go from the demographics lister, since it's the highest level, the demographics lister is the highest level. What that allows you to do is you can also see all the records attached to them. So you can go right to their student records and look at their primary goals and secondary goals and things like that, and type it in that way. No problem. And so another thing, I guess we'll do a quick little thing. So when you do install TOPSpro Enterprise and you're clicking install, it is, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows operating system, right? So if you do have a Mac OS, it's not going to necessarily install. So if you have Boot Camp, I think if you got the Boot Camp utility running in Windows Mode that way, I think Parallels works as well. There may be other, third-party programs that kind of run, Windows OS on a Mac, and then you'll be able to install it. So that's the one kind of situation with that. Are there any other kind of questions with that? I know I've been moving a little quick. I don't want to rush anybody. Okay, so we're okay with there. And then so since we do want to edit, so we'll give you an example. So say they're missing some information, you want to change it, you can kind of edit anything here, right? So if we back up, get out of the student records, go back to the demographics, we'll go to 10. You can always edit information. This is how you would just edit it, right? Like, oh, they didn't type in their full name. Now we'll type in their full name. Or maybe, middle name, we missed the middle. Or the date of birth is wrong. We can kind of go in and change these things, right? So you can kind of always edit if you need to. If you go to the student records, you can always create a new one. It has all the things. You can kind of set up your program year. We'll say last week. With the goals, it's a little tricky since you were kind of asking about it. You have to select primary checkmark in order to be a primary, right? And then if you do not select primary, that is what is considered a secondary goal. So that's the primary goal, select primary. If it's the secondary, don't select anything, just select it. And then you can just save that. And that's all you have to do for the goals. And then when you go in here, since students are nervous about it. Yes, so SSNs are secure. Everything is locked down in that regard. Check with, I guess, your state agency, federal guidelines as far as consent forms, things like that. Everybody's a little different. If you don't want users to see social security numbers, you can kind of go into your users access and disable that. However, the one caveat, I guess, would be if you are the data manager or the data manager, they kind of have those rights, right? You have to have somebody essentially with max rights. I don't know if there's a way to remove that, I guess, from a standpoint of a custom group. No one's ever kind of asked that because people have always been able to or needed to. Essentially, one person has to have power to type these things in, edit these things, change these things. I don't know. So I don't know if we could kind of create a custom one in that regard. But as far as like a generalized, I'm the data manager, I'm the only one with this access, and I'm going to block up all the consent forms, and however you guys do it that way, then you could technically, go into the other users and make sure that SSN is disabled where they can't see social security numbers at all. So there is a way to kind of do it that way. You can mask it for other users. But if you do have a question about like the data manager itself or nobody has access, I would email tech support just because I don't know because I do know there does need to be at least one DM. So I don't know if we have a special group or how that would work necessarily. We might have to create one, I'm not sure. Or if that's something where you've just gotta accept that as, one person has to have that ability to kind of control these accesses, if that makes sense. But yeah, as far as everybody else, you can perfectly, not allow it. So if you're like organization users, you have a social security option, I believe. Now these are all data managers, but I think it's like the data access rights. So these are all defaulted right now, but is under role access, personal access. Yeah. So like enable full SSN display. So you can enable, disable. Right now it's default in the group, so they have it, but you could go in there on your groups because the groups essentially are associated with the agency and just make sure that's unchecked. And then always, go in there, double check that, if you create a test one login, yep, can't see SSN, that's what we want. Just always kind of double check the changes you're making just to make sure they're actually working. And if you have any problems, give us a call, email us, no worries at all. But that's a good question. Does anybody have anything else? I know I'm a little early. Let me see if I missed anything. Any questions about filtering? Any questions about the filters? The idea is to hopefully have a little bit of time for all the random questions at the end. Perfect. I guess we're okay. But yeah, that's the general layout, the general form. I do have a question, I guess. So when you're bringing in data, going back to the third-party import, if you guys in chat, go ahead and say the 4 ways, I shouldn't have said 4 ways, but how can data be created in TOPSpro Enterprise, essentially? Does everybody know all the ways that you can get data into TOPSpro? Directly into T, yep, just like we did right here, we went ahead and create a record. That's one way, just manually. ASAP, okay, third-party program. So essentially, yep, export, perfect. Also exporting from a third party. Anything else? Is there another way? Maybe scanning, if you guys still, I guess nobody scans anymore. But yep, TOPS forms, you can scan them in. And the 4th one, yep, I still scan, perfect, awesome. What is the 4th way information can get into TOPSpro? Wizard, from a test taker when they answer the question, yes. So that's another thing you guys can do. So with eTest, if they're new, the registering, they type in that student ID you give them, they fill out all their demographic information, they take the test, that creates their account, that creates, their demographics, that creates a test record. And that's the 4th way to kind of get information into TE. Exactly. All right. So does anybody have any questions about this? If not, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Adrian.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when your students come in and they take the test, e-test, How do you create a class from there? Like I still have trouble with, we have all our students in TOPSpro, but they're not per class.
Yeah, so I think Adrian's gonna go over that, but you just go to organization classes and you can create it that way. And then under e-test, if you did want it to be set up automatically that way, you can assign the test to a specific thing. There is some student portal stuff that's going to be coming out hopefully next month to like direct import stuff. But essentially you'd be, create the class, get a class enrollment, and do it that way. But there are some other ways coming along, as well as if you want the test specifically to get attached, you can kind of set that up in the e-test under the edit.
And what's the difference between definition and instances?
So you have one definition, and Adrian's going to create this as well, but essentially you just have one definition, and then an instance is for a program year. So from 7/1 to 6/30. So that's why essentially you can attach like the teacher to the definition side, but then you'll have multiple class instances for each program year. So they're kind of in that program year specifically. Why would a student not show up under the student records, but show under classes? So this could be because the student's not showing. Okay, so under student records are different, but show under the classes, and that's also can be a filtering thing. So if you're talking about like a specific class enrollment and you enrolled them, but they're not showing up, what could be going on is could be a filtering if they're not in the site. So then you'd have that site enrollment as well. But again, that all goes back to the filtering. If you click on the filter, it'll have a specific site filter. So if you remove it, you would see it if that's what's going on, or they need to be enrolled in the site and then they pop up because now they're in that site. But yeah, you can always click filter, remove all the filters, and you will always see it. Or if you enroll them in the site and it's filtering by the site, then they'll pop up because they will now be under that site. But that occasionally, it's very hard and tricky for you to kind of create that scenario, but you can technically create that scenario. From a participant, a different question. How do instructors take attendance using TOPSpro? I have looked under tools and help and found nothing new to use webinars without support. So yeah. So does Adrian go over attendance? She might go over it. That's also in the instances. I will quickly kill some. I'll kill one more and then we'll. So as long as they have the enrollment, they're going to show up under the attendance, right? So you go to your class instances, you open a class instance, you can go to attendance and put them in this way. If you want the attendance form, all of this information gets converted to class records though. Class records are technically the attendance records, right? So this is showing the actual attendance. But yeah, but you can also take attendance this way. You can edit it, fill it in that way. But yeah, that you can do attendance this way, or you can import it or scan it in. Those are also perfectly fine. Keep on, we can cover. Yep, yeah, Adrian probably kind of into a little bit, but you're going to create anything anyways. Anything? I think I'll go ahead and move on to Adrian, and then she'll kind of cover the second half. And then if we have any, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time. If we'll stick around and answer some more questions. Does anybody have anything about what I've covered so far? All right, go for it, Adrian. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Luke. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Give me one moment. Okay, just checking. Can everybody see my TOPSpro Enterprise screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so what we're going to go over first is demoing how to add a site to your agency. So all agencies have a single site. So if you go under your agencies, that's where you're going to see your agency ID. And then to create a new site, what you're going to do is organization, sites. And as you can see, this one has 2 sites associated with this agency. We have North Campus, and we have one that was created. To create a new site, we're going to go up to New. And as you can see right now, this area doesn't have anything in it. Once we create the site, this is going to fill out. So let's say we want our site ID to be 2023. Site name is Rolling Hills Adult School South. Okay, so after that, this is pretty much the basics that you need. You don't have to put in a contact ID. It is helpful if you have the other site and you know who is running it. And then that way you can kind of put in their name so you know who to contact there. Also, if this is going to be an e-test site, if they're going to be administering testing on the site, you want to click e-test so the testing sites show up. Then save. And then from here, you can see the class instances that are associated with that site, class definitions, the students that are associated with that site, the users that are associated with that site, and so on. So that is how you add a site to your agency. Now we're going to cover how to add a user. So we're going to go back to organizations, users. As you can see, we have 247 users. We are using Rolling Hills Adult School Simulator, so there are quite a few users that have been created. To create a new user, we're going to go to New. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to select the container, which is which site do we want this user to be associated with? Do we want this user to have agency access level, meaning they can sign into the agency and have access to both campuses? Or do we want them just at the South Campus? So for right now, let's just put them at the new site that we created. So that is the site that they're going to be at. User account, we always recommend that you use the email of the user. Password is uniquely created and can be changed when the new user logs in. We advise you keep the password really simple, maybe 1234. And then on this section down here, before I get to groups, I just want to cover this down here. If you would like them to change their password when they log in the first time, you're going to click password should be changed. So that way they can have their unique password. If you don't want them to change their password, you just would not select this. Access groups. So this is where Luke was kind of touching base on how you can limit people's access to viewing social security numbers or other data. Access groups is where you're going to give the user whatever access you would like to give them. If you see the ones that have ET in front of it, that is an access group that is associated with e-testing. So if you give them access to be a coordinator, then they can go in and create testing sessions, replicate testing sessions, and have access to certain reports. Proctor is this person can go proctor the e-test, set up stations, and launch the testing sessions for the students. Coordinator and proctor has access to both. And remote registration is for helping students who are testing remotely to register for the test. Next, we have TE-based access groups. So you have TE, which is TOPSpro Enterprise. We have enhanced, which means the user has more access to view reports and edit data. We have basic, which means they can view only and not edit data or manipulate data. If you want your user just to have the basic access, and so on. There's some other access groups. Some can be uniquely made to have the name there. For right now, we're going to give this user, they're going to be an ET proctor. Now you notice it populated, but you have to remember to click add. If you don't click add, it's not technically there. Oh, when you give somebody e-test coordinator or proctor access rights, it's going to prompt you that you are verifying that they have completed their training and that they are okay to proctor and be a coordinator. Moving on down, the user contact. This can be minimally filled out if you would like, or you can fill out the whole thing. The minimum requirements to have the user account created is a first name. Oh, if I could spell my first name. A first name, a last name, and an email address. And that is the minimum requirements that you have to have in order to create a user. Down here, we highly recommend not manipulating these menu access rights too much. That is why we have the access groups created. So that way it's kind of all defaulted in there. However, like Luke had shown, if you want to edit certain access rights as far as like personal information and you want to do it individually, you go to add access right, enable full social security number display. We want to disable that. So that means if I disable it for this particular user, they are not going to be able to see the full social security number display. And I would just say add access right. And that's all we have to do once it's unselected. All these are just your basic listers of what they have access to. If it has nothing in it, that means they have no access to it. If it's grayed out, that means they have access. So everything that is a blank box has nothing, and the gray square, that means they have access. So if you're done creating your user account, you just click on save. And now that user is created. So let's go back and find the user. So you go again under organizations. You're going to go down to users. And from here, you can filter. You can filter by first name, user account, or email. We're going to go ahead and filter by email.
Let me, sorry, Adrian, one note. When it's gray, it is just the default from the access group. That's all that means. So it could be checked or unchecked. The gray just means it's using the access group settings. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. No, thank you, Luke, for the clarification. Then you can search for starts with, contains, ends with, or equal to. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I did not show up for some reason, so that's okay. We'll just go ahead, and it's most likely because, as you can see, this is at the agency level, and I put that user access group at the South Campus level. If I go to South Campus, then I see that new user I created. Now, if that happens, and you're like, wait, I created this user, or I can't find a user, and you happen to be on this agency level, then you just go to subsites. Once you click on subsites, you notice our number is 247 right now. If I click on subsites, that's going to jump up and show me all of the sites. So now it's going to show me like 22, 23 Rolling Hills South. Now I'm showing up because I clicked on the subsites. So if you log in and you're at your agency level and you can't find somebody, go ahead and click subsites, or you can go this little arrow down and find the site that you want to look at. So that is how you add and manage users. Was there any questions about that? If we use third-party import, do we need to create user access in TE still, or does their title automatically set their user access? So the answer to that, I believe, is it will not give them the user access unless you click that on when the import selection. So I believe that is an option for import, is you would select what user access group you would like them to have, the data manager would, and then it would carry over. Otherwise, if it's not selected, you would have to manually do it. Okay, so moving on, we're going to go to class definition versus class instance. Class definition is basically a shell. So basically, class definition is a shell that you're creating so you can create the class instances and have it housed in that section. Definition carries through from year to year, it can be sent over, whereas a class instance has to be replicated into the new year. So here's our class definitions that we have. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new class definition. We're going to go under New, the site. So let's stick with the Rolling Hills South if we want to have the class definition there. If we want to have it at North Campus, this one was created most likely by a user who was in here playing around with Rolling Hills Adult School, which is perfectly fine. That's what it's here for. Or we can do it at the agency level. So we're going to do it at the 2023 South. Class ID can be unique to what you would like it to be. If you're following a pattern, maybe it's by year, or maybe it's by, number sequence, alphabetical sequence, but you can make it whatever you like. If you want to make it like A101, that would be your class ID. We normally don't recommend extended IDs unless you're going to be using this class with the same exact ID more than once in the year. So what I mean by that is maybe we're going to have an A101 fall session, and those dates are going to be different. So we would then have an extended ID of fall 2022, because that was the fall of this year. And so that would be our extended ID for this one. And then we would create another class definition with the extended ID of spring 2023. So you can use that same class ID, and the extended ID makes it unique. For this demonstration, we're not going to do the extended ID. Course code, I don't think that you have to have that in there. Course description, we can go ahead and put in math class. Zip codes, these are put on by the usually administration, or your consortium has zip codes. This is primarily in California, where you would click what that class is about, and that's a little bit deeper dive than what we're going to go into today. Same with the A22 course code, same thing. They're just codes that label the class and give the class description of what it's going to teach. Again, we're not going to go into that too much today. That's a little bit deeper dive than what we're going to cover. So once you create your class definition, you're going to select Save. Now that that has been saved, you notice our navigator populated more options. So from here, we can go into the class instance. And I just want to show you again how this is very basic. It's basically just creating the shell for the class ID and the description. Once we have our definition created, if we go into class instances, from here, you can see there's no class instance associated with this definition. We can do a new one. As you can see, there's a lot more information on this page that we can input. We'll start at the top, where it is agency is at 2223 RHAS South. That is our site. The program year is going to be for this current program year. Our class definition is the A101. It is labeled as a math class. Our start date by default is always July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. If you would like to change these dates, you can. You can manipulate this to maybe that started October 3rd, and it's going to end, we'll say next month. Now, I changed the class start date. If you are importing from a third party, the dates have to match. So if you're doing any information like class attendance, class enrollments, and you're going to be putting them into this class from a third party, make sure when you create that class instance in your third party, the dates match. From here, we can select instructional program. Is this class basic ABE, ESL, citizenship, high school diploma, and so on? Once you select your instructional program for this, we'll just do basic ABE. You can select if there's any specialty programs, transition focuses into work, workforce training. If there's any special program enrollments, if this is a jail program, corrections, maybe it's a family literacy program. If there's a focus area that is associated with that class, you would click here. Focus areas are primarily for EL Civics and citizenship. So because this is an ABE, this does not require a focus area. Focus areas is how this class and its attendance is connected with funding. So it's telling TE reporting how to fund this class, essentially. That's the basic information that you have to have in order to create a class instance. If you would like to fill out this bottom part, you can. It kind of helps your site keep track of the information better. Start time, you can do morning, afternoon, evening, instructional settings, physical settings, computers used in the class, intensity, where you would, what days there are, what times of the day there are, and so on. That doesn't affect your reporting. It's more for the site to have better informational data on that class. Again, just for the basic to create the class, you don't need to fill that out. So we can go ahead and save it from here. So now we've created that class. So if I go back to organizations, classes, and class instances, again, we're default set it to Rolling Hills, the agency level, but remember we created that class at the 2023 site. So we could click it here, and there it is. If you want to change this class, say the date changed or the name changed, you would just double click it. Go ahead and click on that light orange pencil. It's going to open up the edit option, and you can change it however you would like there and then just save. So if I want to change the date to June 30th, then I save it, and now that's saved. Were there any questions on class definitions or instances? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to how to create steps to adding. Wait, if we export the class instances from a third party, will the information such as instructional programs be filled out already, or do we have to enter manually? When you're exporting from a third party, it all depends on the information that you are selecting to be exported into TE. So there are different categories that you can select, such as program enrollments, class enrollments, student updates. And so it all depends on what you select at the time of the export import, and then that will be what carries over. Hope that helped. What will happen if the class dates don't match the third-party import? I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, that it will throw an error because it won't find that class. It will say that class, it won't be able to find it because they have to match, the dates have to match. That's how they communicate with each other. Okay, if there's no other questions, you're welcome. I'm going to go ahead now. Luke briefly touched on this, on how to add student records, but we're going to go ahead and check on that again. There's multiple ways to get to student records. If you had that student in this particular class, we double click on that class. As you can see, there is class enrollments. That's a longer way to get to the student record, but you can get to the student record this way. As you can see, there's no students in this class. But to demonstrate how to add student records, we're going to go from here. We can either go to new and add a class enrollment, which I might as well do it that way since I'm here. So student ID, there is no student selected. So we're going to go ahead and we can either filter by program year or clear section. And we can also select from the lister. The reason that you're not seeing any students here is because there's none associated with that site. Remember, we're in that new site, 2023 RHAS South. So to add a student record, we're going to cancel this and we're going to go close these tabs. We're going to go to records, students, demographics. And from here, we can add a new record. We can also move some of these students into that site if we wanted to. So we could enroll them in that site essentially. Let's say I wanted to enroll, let's find, I think Luke was 10. Yep, there's Luke. So we're going to enroll Luke into that site. We would just click on enroll. Student, we'll have to find him again. Is number 10, which for some reason is not showing up. There he is. Okay. So we're going to find the student, no site selected. And from here, we can move him to that site. So remember before that student wasn't showing up, if you want to add them into the site from the agency level or from a different site, that is how you would do it. So since we're here, I'm just going to complete this. And then add. Okay, and save. So now Luke is going to show up on the main Rolling Hills, and also now they're going to show up under that new site that we created. I'm going to go back to the agency level. So Luke showed you how to create the site. You go to new and you just fill out the student information. Like he showed you the name, birth date, as much information as you can. Now let's say you wanted to update that student. So let's say we needed to update Luke's record. So you just double click on that. And you can do this all third party. There is a student update, import, export option. But if we wanted to add an entry update record for multiple things, we could just click on this red box. We would select our record date, which site we are creating that record for. So let's say it's going to be for site number 2. This is where he was showing you with goals on primary and secondary. So let's say we didn't have the student's goals. Now we do. So we would just say, okay, now we've got more information. We know the student's goal. You can mark it there. Maybe that student wants to go into that math class recreated. So we can just look for that math class. And then if you type, so what I did was I just clicked on the box and I started typing the class name. You can also just type the class ID instead of trying to search for it. It makes it a little easier. Click on the math class, student update accumulated. This is where you enter your hours. So if that student had 5 hours, the date they entered the class, you would do that here. Are they active? Yes. And so on. This lets you update lots of the students' information at one time. If you want to update their employment status, maybe their personal status changed, maybe they're in a special program now, or they've gotten a job, or they've entered training. This is also where you would update if they earned their high school diploma, they went into college. This is where you would put them into their program, whichever program they're going to go into, date they entered, date they exited. We always recommend leaving program status as NA because if you mark retain program, it throws off the exit population. Program progress is where you would just say when they leave, they progress through the level of program, they completed the lower level or program, or they advanced to a higher level of program. Maybe they left mid-year, maybe it's the end of the year. This is the reason for exiting. Did they have any new barriers to employment, and so on. And then when you're done, you just click save. And that is how you can add the student's record and also update the student's record at the same time. Let's say the student took a paper test and you want to add that in. You didn't scan it in, you want to add it in manually, or you just want to update their test record manually. So again, just so we can show from start to finish, we would go under organizations, records, students, demographics. I will go over the retained in program again. Yes, just give me 1 second, please. And again, we're on Rolling Hills Adult School. So I'm just going to go back to 2023 South. We have 1 student in there. You would find your student, double click on your student. And over here in the navigator, you have your in-program years where you can put them into their program years, student records, which is their goals, their employment status, class enrollments where they're enrolled, class records, That is their hours of attendance. What program are they enrolled in? Their program records, have they completed the program? And here is your tests. So if you needed to add it in manually, you would double click on that. As you can see, Luke does not have a test record, so we're going to add new. Again, it's always going to prompt you to select the program year that the test was taken in. So this is the current program year. The class instance populates again. What class did that student take the test for? Again, instead of searching through all of these fields, I'm just going to type math. It brings it up for me. Assessment date, when did they take the test? Let's say they took it on the 12th. Which site? There's that site again. Did they take it at? We're going to say they took it at 2023 Rolling Hills Adult School South. Assessment type, fixed form, appraisal, observation. This is just the general default setting for them. If you were doing something for EL Civics like co-ops, you would select this and that field will change just to that one. But we're going to go back and do the fixed form on the observation. So if you know the test that they took, as you can see, again, there's a long list of testing. There's a huge lister. Let's say they took the math test and you know the math test is 913. You start typing 913, that pulls up that test. Now that that test is populated, then comes the item responses. If you know the item responses, that's great. You can fill them in for the student. You can go A, B, D, D. Maybe they skipped 5 through 7, A, and so on. And so you can just fill out this part for the student for the testing responses. If you don't know the testing responses, you can select score override. The raw score is if the test has 40 questions, the raw score is how many they got correct. So what you're going to do is if they only got 10 correct, you're going to fill in 10. You notice the scale score is not showing up, and it's not going to show up after we populated this as well. It shows up after it gets that raw score. So I'm going to go ahead and save it to show you that. Okay, sorry, I was just reading the chat. So we're going to go ahead and save. Now you can see the raw score or the scale score populated because of that raw score. So without that raw score, the scale score won't populate. So you have two ways of doing it. You can overwrite or you can enter it manually. Either way will work. Now that test record has been created and is associated with that class, with that student at that site. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Were there any questions on that? What about marking left program with? Okay, Lucas addressing those. Okay, there's no more questions about, or no questions about adding a test. I'm going to go ahead and move on. So the next on our list is Export Wizard. So the Export Wizard is exporting listers or reports or information. So let's say you wanted to, we're going to go to our lister. We're going to go to records. Maybe you want to know student demographics. You want to export all of that information into an outside report, like an Excel sheet or a PDF that you can share at a meeting or present to your administrator. So we're going to use records, students, demographics. We're going to use this lister. This is again for the entire agency. Maybe you want to run it for the whole agency. That's fine. Maybe you just want to run it for North Campus. From here, like Luke had mentioned, you can filter through if you want to add a column, right click and add the columns that you want. Maybe you want to show the student's email address if they have one. Maybe you don't want to show their native language. So to hide that, you would right click, hide native language. Maybe you don't want to show their ethnicity, right click, hide ethnicity. Now, if you get this lister to what you're looking for, the students that you want to find, up here where it says export, you would just click on the export. You have options. You can export out third-party data, can go export it out to a third party. You can export the exam results and so on. For this one, we're going to export into, you have options of either an Excel. If you click on your down arrow, you can put that into a PDF. And you would just save, and it's in your documents. If you want to switch that, you could switch it to your PC or your downloads. We're going to go ahead and save it. The export operation was successfully completed, meaning that now that is saved to my computer under my documents. If you want to see how this is going to look once it's exported, you would just go to the print. Once you click on that print, you can click on preview, and it's going to show you, here's all the columns that are going to show. If you click on preview, sorry, it's taking a second. This is what your report is going to look like. It's going to have, this is what it's going to come out as. You've got 60 pages, student ID, last name and first name, name, date of birth, gender, race, and so on. So this is essentially how it's going to look when you export it and when you go to print it. Was there any questions so on the export wizard or anything? Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and we're going to look at some reports. So we're going to go up to the reports tab. And here on the reports tab, there are lots of different reports that you can run. You have your CASAS e-test, which has your next assigned test, personal score report, your W2U balance, content standards by NRS, and so on. You have your demographic submenus, demographic detail, summary, lots of information on hours. Student hours are all right here, monthly attendance, hours since last test, program outcomes, enrollment summary, enrollment update summary, test results. And there's submenus off of these where you have your skills profile. You can go individual, or you can go summary, which kind of does the whole class. Competency, same thing, individual or by summary. Content standards, learning gains, test response, test history. You have your consumer reports, consumer skills profile, graduation reports, data management, especially since we're coming into the Q3 data submission. You have your NRS integrity, your NRS data integrity detail, student profile, class personnel, duplicate students if you want to see who's duplicated. State reports for, especially for California, this is another one, barriers to employment, CAPE DIR, CAPE program hours, employment earnings survey, quarterly results, and so on. Federal reports, again, this is kind of a breakdown of the tables. So NRS tables, periods of participation. We're talking about that POP. If you ever hear us talk about that, that's that period of participation. Report locator wizard. This is nice if you click on it and you're like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm looking for, but I know I want it to have hours in it. So if you click on the keyword and you type in what you're looking for, it gives you options of reports that you can pull and that you can run. Reports manager, that's just for the ones that you have run already. Dashboards and any reports that you have kind of customized that offer different options. So for this one, we're going to do test results and we're going to go to skills profile and individual skills profile. So we're going to go ahead and run through this one and kind of show you the setup and how you can kind of navigate different settings. As you can see, if you have multiple boxes here, that means you can run this report for multiple years. If you only have one box, then you can only run it for that current year. You can run it under programs. So you can run this for all of your programs, but maybe you just want to run it for ESL. You can run it for that. Class status, you can run it for active, completed, inactive, or just everybody. You can customize the date ranges if you would like not to run it. This runs beginning of the year to date. So this would run from the start of your school year, which typically is August, to today's date when we generate it. Warn if too many pages is checked. So if there's too many pages in this report, it's going to warn you about that. This is your report sort order. So it's going to go agency, program, student name, student ID. This is your report style. So if you don't like the blue, you can change it to green or red or black and white. Show NRS educational functioning level gains. That's where you would mark that. Show grade level equivalent. So if you want to know what that grade level equivalent is of that test, you can mark that as well. Show only students with competency analysis, show only students with content standard analysis, and so on. So there's many, many options here. The default option is pretty well set. Let's say you just want to see it for a specific class. So you would go class instance, and you could filter for that specific class ID. And you can just click on this funnel, type in the student or the class ID that you want to look for, click OK, and then it's just going to search for the information with that class ID. Student demographics, same thing. If you're looking for a specific student, you would run it for that specific student. You can either type in the student's name by clicking on the funnel. Same thing with the ID, type in their ID by clicking on the funnel. Or you can also do multiple students. If you unselect and then you select one, hold your control key down, 2, 3, and you can run it for those students as well. So whoever's checked is who it's going to run for. So let's go ahead just to keep the report short. We're just going to do a couple of students here. And then after you're done selecting from your report navigator, you can go over here and click generate. If you want to check your general settings again before you generate it, go back up here to general settings, and that takes you back to the start page. We're going to go ahead and click generate. That's how you generate. As you can see for this student here, individual skills profile, most recent test was reading. The form was 84R. The date they took it was April 14th of this year. This was their scale score. This is their NRS level. It was form level B. Number of items, there was 32 items on the test. They answered 23 correct, and they attempted to answer all 32. The grade equivalent, remember we checked that box, is 5.5. So that means that is their grade equivalent reading level for this test. Then it kind of gives you a breakdown of how they scored in each section. So basic communication, they scored really well. Consumer economics, the number, this N means number of questions that were associated with this topic. So there was one question that tests based on this in this reading competencies category. There were 6 questions that touched based on community health resources, or I'm sorry, community resources, and so on. And that is how you would generate the report. Up here in your layout settings, some reports offer graph or pie graph setting. This one does not, but if you wanted to change some of your layout settings, you could do it here. Maybe we don't want to start with this alphabetical order and we want to start differently. So you would go to student name. Right now it is set to sort ascending. If we click sort descending, apply, it will then regenerate the report. And it should have run that. Oh, that's because we only have certain students. That's correct. So that means that students are in the descending order. Okay, perfect. From here, if you would like to print it, you would just go over here to more. Oops, I'm sorry. Click on that. My apologies, over here to print. So you can print this report, or again, there's an export feature. So you can export this report and save it as a PDF, or you can save it as a Word document or an Excel. So if you want to save this and download it, you can. So you can share it at a meeting or with your administrator or with your teachers to show them how the student is doing. So that is the report navigator setup, and that is how you would run a report. Was there any questions so far on the reporting? No? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this one. So on my lister here, for California agencies only, we're going to go ahead and show you the CAPE report. So I'm going to go down to state reports. Again, this is for California only. And let's say we're going to run our CAPE DIR. That is the one that is due every quarter. Can class and teacher be displayed? Yes, on certain reports. On certain reports, when you go to that navigator, if the class and the teacher are associated with the student or with that test, yes. Each report is a little different and has different filters with it. But yes, certain reports you definitely can have the class and the teacher displayed. So for California agencies only, we're going to go to state reports. And I'll be quick because I know we have other agencies from different states. We're going to run our CAPE data integrity report. These are for our data submissions. These are, you don't really want to customize these at all. You just want to generate it. It's taking its time. So for your CAPE, for your California agencies, your CAPE data integrity reports, these are really good to kind of give you an overview of what your quarterly data submission is going to look like and gives you the option to clean it up. As you can see, it shows there's 807 students currently enrolled in this program year. 1 is not enrolled in the program. There are 3 students that are missing birth dates, less than 12 hours, 0 empty hours, and so on. You can just kind of go through the report and it just item line lists everything. How many have earned high school diploma and so on. If you want to know who's missing, you hover over the number and you have the option to, you can click on it, which will bring you up the students' names here. And then you can kind of access the students individually. Or, and again, if you want to get back to the main report page, click over here on the CAPE Data Integrity Report, takes you back. If you want a little bit deeper dive on this, you would right click. It brings up all of these drill down options, student population, class records, NRS monitor, and so on. So this is nice if you're really trying to figure out why they're showing up. You can really use this monitor, it's very helpful. Once this data is all cleaned up for agencies who submit it, you would just clean it up, run it again, and kind of double check it. When you're ready to submit, you would go to your tools and quarterly data submission wizard. And that is where you would submit your finalized quarter report. Was there any other questions I could address before I show you how to disconnect from TOPSpro Enterprise? And Luke, since you're so well versed, is there anything that you can see that I missed or that I should mention or go over again?
Nope, you're perfect. You're you're good to go. But yeah, if you guys
Right,
have any
thank you.
questions at all,
Yeah, thank you, sir. If you guys have any questions before I show you how to disconnect from TE, please ask them now.
So Adrian, there is.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, this is Mandalee. There's a question in the chat and it asks if you can give a quick overview on surveys, quarterly surveys to be specific.
Okay, that's mainly for California. We can definitely do that if that's okay. We'll go over that one. So surveys, you're going to want to run your wizard. So employment quarterly surveys go every quarter. And the best way to explain it is whatever physical quarter you're in right now, like we're physically in quarter 3 for a little bit longer, 2 quarters back. So you're always going to want to make sure you run your wizard for 2 quarters back, and the wizard will tell you if it's too early or too late. So to run that, you would go to Tools, Core Performance Wizard. Because it's 2 quarters back, we know it's still in the current program year. We're going to go to Next. As you can see, this has already been run with the Rolling Hill simulator. Everyone can use it. So sometimes they pre-run it, but it's already been run for exit quarter 22-23, quarter 1 and 2. So as you can see, it's not going to let me run it because it's too early. So it's not going to give me that option to run it. Once you run your core performance wizard, then what you're going to want to do is go over to records, core performance students, and it's always defaulted to exit quarter 2 quarters back. I personally like to uncheck that and make sure the exit quarter is, I select it myself. So for the one that's due this April, we'll select 22-23 quarter 1. Remember, it's 2 quarters back, and we're currently in quarter 3. You select that, click OK. And this has already been run, but what you would want to do from here is you would want to highlight the students that you want to send the survey to, and you can highlight a large group by having the top highlighted, hold your shift key down, and select on the next one you want to highlight to that group. Then send survey invite. Once you send the survey invite, because I don't want to get too far into this because we do have other agencies that aren't in California. Once you send your survey invite, you just kind of follow the prompts where it asks what language you'd like to send it in. If you'd like to send it email or text or both, we always recommend both. And if you want to use the default survey image, or if you have one that you have customized. So I hope that kind of helped. And then if you need to see who has responded, really quickly, we go to records, survey responses. Again, quarter to take survey. This is saying the current quarter because this has already been ran. It's showing for the next quarter, which is coming up very soon. Personally, I like to unselect it and go for the one that I am in right now, which is quarter to take survey is at 22-23 quarter 3. Click on that. And then you can see the status, they've all been delivered. And you can, who has been filled in by staff, who has responded, and so on. And if you want to just look for surveys responded to, and you want to just find the ones who say no, you can go ahead and click on yes, click OK. And this is nice because then you can see, okay, why haven't they responded? Now, if you notice the exit quarter is set for 4 quarters back, it's kind of a mixture. It's set for 4 quarters back, which is a year, and the 2 quarters back. So we just want to focus on the ones from 2 quarters back so we can switch our exit quarter to reflect that 22-23 quarter 1. Remember, your current quarter that you're physically in, 2 quarters or 6 months back is what you're sending out and you're following up with, as well as TE will send the ones from 4 quarters back or a year ago. So again, these have all been delivered. We're looking survey responded. Yes, all these individuals responded. Now let's see who hasn't. No. So for these 3 individuals, you have options. You can reach out to them, like contact status says, not yet contacted, contacted, left voicemail. So you have the option, you can try and reach out to them again through phone or email. You can resend the survey. You would just do the same thing. You would highlight all the students and resend invite. And then you can resend that again and try your best to get a hold of the students so they can fill out the survey. Yes, you want to make sure that all of your attendance and your tests are in this before you run the wizard to make sure that that's the most accurate data. Was there any other questions on the reporting? I saw one about, I don't know if Luke answered it, question on the data integrity report 6B, total employed with notice. What is that about? Can we update? So total employed with notice, that goes under that category of a student record. So if we go to records, students and demographics, we'll go there again. I'm just going to pick on a random student. We'll pick on this top one. If you go under student records, labor force status, that is what that's referring to. And all that is just an option for, if I click on, there's a couple ways to do it. Add, update record, or I can create a new record, or I can modify one of these. Just to show you, we'll do the add, entry, update record. And all that's showing is that those students, or when the information was updated, it was marked here, employed with notice, meaning that maybe they're going to be becoming employed soon. So they've got notice that they have received the job, but they have not started yet. I hope that made sense. Okay, was there any other questions? Okay, and thank you so much, Luke, for heading off the questions in the chat box. You've been great. So now I'm going to show you how you can exit from TOPSpro Enterprise. What you're going to do is make sure all your tabs are closed. You have a couple of options. If you just want to exit out completely, real quick, one shot done, you can click the red X over here. If you want to disconnect, so maybe you want to come back to it and you don't want to have to put in your agency ID and your username again, you would just disconnect. You can lock it, so that way it stays there where you're at, but it's locked so nobody can see your screen. Or you can exit it this way. So once I exit this, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Mandalee, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and exit TOPSpro Enterprise and stop sharing my screen.
All right. Thank you so much, Adrian and Luke, for joining us today and going over the TOPSpro overview. We really appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy day and joining us. My colleague, Holly Clark, is going to go ahead and drop in our evaluation link. We ask that you please take a few moments to provide your feedback on today's session, as it does help us inform how we plan our future professional developments, as well as a link to check out all of the different professional development opportunities that we are offering. You can always join us at our caladultedgetraining.org site, where we have some a pretty full, rich spring calendar already planned out. So with that, we're going to go ahead and say thank you all. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes just to allow you to grab those links from the chat. And if there's any questions, feel free to come off of mute.
Not sure if you got to read, because I know it flooded the text real quick, but if you're worried about like when you ran the survey thing, make sure there are pops. You can run like the NRS monitor and see if they have multiple pops. So sometimes that's what I was trying to explain earlier. Like if they came in and then they had that 9-day gap and then they came back, so they're technically with you, but because of that gap, it kind of can create that employment earnings survey because of that first pop. So just make sure all your attendance, all the tests are in. Run the NRS monitor, it'll show you how many pops they have within a year. So it could be something like that. And that's why you need to make sure you get your attendance in every month. So if you just do it at the very end, then that student's kind of dropped.
Real quickly, you can also run a core performance population report that will show you everybody who is going to be on which quarter. And if you see somebody who's not supposed to be on there, when you run your wizard, you do have the option to deselect them.
Thank you. All right, it looks like everybody has said their thank yous. Thank you again to Adrian and Luke for being with us today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close it out, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.